Hey, what's up? It's Kit. Time for another video. Today we're tying wire assist hooks. Now, I'm gonna depart from my usual using UV glue, and I'm gonna explain myself why. For this, we're using shrink tube. I don't normally use shrink tube. I used to, but the thing is, when you're tying ordinary assist hooks, they don't really protect your bindings as much as epoxy does. Epoxy, especially 5-minute or 30-minute epoxy, even rod building epoxy, is way better at protecting your wraps than UV or shrink tube. Okay, that is a fact. So most of the time I use 5-minute epoxy, but I can't really show you that, you know, they're in drying wheels, or if I have time I actually use rod building epoxy. I can't film that, you know, it's just, it takes too much time. But that's the pretty much the whole reason why whenever I'm doing like you know, videos here and I have UV epoxy, it's just pretty much to show you a finished product and how they look like. Okay, now if at all, what I'll do is actually use UV as a coating for, like, take for example, if I'm making these. Okay, I'll make a epoxy coat, and then the top coat would be the UV glue with epoxy coating. It just works better that way. All right, so let's start with this. We will be using this is 7-strand. It's actually quite stiff. All right, but it's still flexible. Okay, it's still flexible, as you can see there. So we'll start with this. You'll need a few tools and you'll need crimps. Okay, so let me just cut a piece here. Okay, start from the bottom. Okay, give yourself some space. That's the most important thing there. You go around, okay, and then from the bottom again, you poke your wire through the eye. Alright, like so. Then you get your crimp. I'm using a double barrel crimp for this. You can use single barrel, doesn't matter. Okay, so put it like so, all the way to the eye. Now, very important thing here is to actually see exactly where it ends and mark it. Okay, for me it's a bend. I'll take that off. See that bend right there? Okay, I'll cut it short, just like that. Okay, I need a better one here. Okay, cut it. And then take your crimp, put it back on like so. So you can see there's a tiny bits sticking out there. That's fine. You just have to be careful. Alright, now this is very important. Okay, this type of crimper, you'll see that it forms circles there. This is very important for this, because if you use the other crimper, the other type of crimper, what happens is that it crushes the tube and the wire, and you don't want your wire to weaken. So no, don't use that. Okay, simple as that. Now measure the tube right there. And here's a little trick that I've been using for years. Okay, these are round nose pliers. Now if you insert this on in your tube, okay, and spread it out just a tad bit, like so, you can actually make the size of the tube a bit bigger. what happens there is if you slide it like that, it goes through the crimp, goes through the wire easily. Okay, and it doesn't affect the shrinking. There we go. As you can see, very, very clean, very, very nice. All right. Now, the tricky part of this whole operation is actually not the hook, it's the solid ring installation. Now, if you can see here, I put a little bit of space just so my fingers don't get hit by that little tag, just in case. All right, so if you have a jig you want to use this with, this is just an example. Measure that against the jig, and for us it's right here. All right, now I use an eye tool to make everything clean. Now before that though, what we need to do is actually cut our shorter piece of shrink tube and put it inside the assembly like so. You can slide it over the crimp. There we go, just so you have extra space. Now we measure against the jig just to be sure. Measure twice, 3 times. There we go. Want it to be there. Okay, and a bit shorter because of the split ring allowance. Okay, and then we form an eye just like that. Okay, that's the start of the eye, and then we slide our crimp. That just basically marks things for us. Okay, we slide our crimp like so. Okay, you might have to wiggle this around just so you have space to form the eye. That's fine. Okay, and then form the eye finally like so. Now that we have that, we can insert our solid ring like so, and then insert it in the crimp so that we can mark where we need to cut it. Okay, let me put this in the vise just so you can see it clearly. I mean, it's a bit fiddly. This is why I don't really like using them, but if you're plagued by toothy fish, this is a very good way. Okay, so there we go. Tighten that a bit. Okay, so we have that. All we have to do is just kink it. Okay, now here's a trick. What you could do is actually push this crimp in. Okay, and you can see the bend clearly. Now again, one of the reasons why I don't really like this is because it's just too much of a headache sometimes. All right, so you see that I pushed it in. As soon as I pushed it in, I can see where I need to cut. All I have to do is just cut it shorter by a tad bit. Cut it. Now as soon as you hear that click, sometimes there's still a couple of strands that actually stick. All you have to do is just wiggle it around and you should be okay. Now that's tight. You can see that there's just a bit sticking out there. Okay, push it in a bit, and the position or the length of the shrink tube that I put on there, it actually helps me out. Okay, then crimp like so. Crimp it again like that. Now you can slide your shrink wrap over like so. Alright, and then you can heat things up with a lighter. Heat both sides. Okay, so this particular one is tooth-proof. Alright, still moves, so you know, still dances with the jig, but it's completely tooth-proof, and it will help save you from those toothy critters.